Hey, I'm Pat. Let me tell you something that happened a few years back when I worked at an accessories store in a mall. It was my second month on the job, and I remember how slow things got after lunch. Not many customers around. I'd usually sit near the emergency exit, sip on a soda, and people watch. There was this lady, Frances. Everyone called her Mrs. Garcia. She was in charge of cleaning. Sometimes, when she saw I didn't have much to do, she'd come over and chat. She had this knack for telling stories about her hometown. It wasn't a famous place, but it had its share of tales. I can't remember the name of the town, but it was pretty quirky. One day, I had to stay late because there was an event in the mall. We closed after 10 p.m. Mrs. Garcia stayed late too. We ran into each other in the hallway by the service stairs. She saw I was bored, so she started talking. That's when she told me this story. In her town, years ago, there was this terrible drought. Everything dried up. People were desperate. Families were scraping by with whatever they could find. But there was this well on the outskirts of town. It never ran dry, not even in the worst days. The well belonged to an old woman. People called her a witch. They said she turned into animals at night. She offered water in exchange for weird stuff, animal bones, trinkets. No one knew what she did with all that junk, but people needed water. You either traded with the witch or died of thirst. Mrs. Garcia told me that many folks were scared to go to that well, but someone always found the courage to bring her something so their family could have water. The old woman rarely turned anyone away. She'd take their trades and let them fill their buckets. One day, a mom had no choice but to send her 14-year-old son for water. The dad worked on a distant ranch and only came home every few days. The mom couldn't leave her youngest daughter alone, so she figured the witch wouldn't mess with the kid. She packed him some food, tortillas, dried meat, corn. It was valuable back then. The boy went, but he never came back. I asked Mrs. Garcia, "What happened? Did he get lost?" She just shook her head. The town searched for him, asked around, checked trails, even looked in abandoned houses. No one had a clue. The only weird thing was that the same day he disappeared, a can of water showed up at the mom's doorstep. It was like the boy had made it home with the water but couldn't get inside. Fear spread. Some said the witch was watching him and punished him when the trade wasn't enough. Others thought he ran into bandits. But the worst part came a few days later. The boy turned up in a nearby field. Mrs. Garcia told me they found him with his eyes sewn shut. He was alive but disoriented. He couldn't speak, and he'd flinch whenever someone got close. They took him to the only clinic in town. The doctors said his eye sockets were stitched shut with thin threads. When they asked him what happened, he said he couldn't remember. Everything was dark. That's when the boy's dad flipped out. He was furious that no one stopped his son from going to the witch's house. He convinced himself she did it. The boy's condition had to be witchcraft, right? The dad's revenge was brutal. One night, he grabbed a machete and went to the witch's house. Neighbors said they heard screams, then silence. The next morning, they found her hut half burned, with remains inside. There was no official investigation. The town figured the dad did it. No one ever really found out what happened. The twist came when Mrs. Garcia told me she knew the witch. They'd been friends since Mrs. Garcia was 25. She said the witch wasn't bad. She helped people with remedies, cooked herbs for fevers, even gave massages to crying kids. She had good intentions. Mrs. Garcia thought people had it out for her because she wasn't very friendly. But inside, she was kind. I don't know what to think. Was it the witch, or was it some evil person who saw an opportunity? What do you think? If you're enjoying the video, please subscribe the channel for future videos, and like and share with your friends. This story comes from a young boy named Alex, who prefers to stay anonymous. You'll see why as you hear what happened. Alex used to call his grandpa every week. They were super close, and his grandpa lived in a small town in Texas where things had gotten really tense because of all the crime. Shootings and other bad stuff were pretty common. One week, Alex asked his grandpa what was new. Usually, his grandpa loved to chat about everything going on, but this time he sounded different. He was quiet, almost overwhelmed. Alex could tell something was up. He asked if his grandpa was okay. After a pause, his grandpa started telling his story. In their town, there was a man who owned a ton of valuable land. With everything so unstable, this guy started getting threats. Some criminal group wanted his land, and they gave him two choices: sell it to them or lose it in a bad way. People in town told him to leave, take his family somewhere safe. But this man was rooted to his land. It was his life, his family's legacy. He couldn't just leave. One night, Grandpa went out to buy some last-minute groceries, tortillas and stuff for dinner. The streets were empty, but he saw a man sitting on the sidewalk. Because of the dark, he couldn't see well, but he recognized the clothes. It was the landowner, but something was off. His clothes were stained with blood. Grandpa approached, thinking maybe the man had been hurt in an accident. He called out, "Mr. Thompson?" When the man looked up, Grandpa saw tears streaming down his face. He was breathing hard, repeating something about his house being burned and his family still being inside. He kept saying it over and over, like he was stuck in shock. Grandpa was shocked. He'd never seen this tough man so broken. He decided to get help, so he ran to the police station. But it was closed, which was weird because the station was always open, except when criminals were involved. Grandpa knew it wasn't a coincidence. He ran back to see if he could at least get the man to a hospital, but when he got there, the man was gone. He checked around, asked neighbors, but no one had seen him. Worried, Grandpa went home. The next day, the news spread. Criminals had set fire to the man's house that same night. Everyone inside was killed, even the animals. It turned out the landowner had been shot several times before they burned everything down. No one survived. Grandpa realized that the man he'd seen on the street might have been the tormented spirit of that poor guy, who never wanted to sell his land and stayed to protect it until the end. After hearing this, Alex started asking his grandpa about other similar stories, ones involving drug traffickers. Grandpa just laughed and said he had plenty of those. Then he told Alex another story. One night, Grandpa was getting ready for dinner, just some cereal and milk. He sat down at the table, but before he could eat, he heard a gunshot outside. He ran to close the window and another shot rang out. The shooting just kept getting worse. Grandpa threw himself to the ground and stayed there, covering his head, until the shots finally stopped. He got up, went to his room and lay down, waiting for it all to pass. All night, he heard sirens and chaos outside. The next morning, the chaos had died down. The bodies were gone, but he could see bullet holes in all the houses around him. He talked to a neighbor who said one of the bodies had been right in front of his door. But for Grandpa, it was just another day. He didn't think much of it. But that same night, everything changed. Grandpa was getting ready for bed when he noticed the kitchen light was on. That was strange because he always turned off all the lights after dinner. He walked towards the kitchen, thinking maybe he'd just forgotten. But when he got there, he saw a man sitting at the table with his back turned. In their part of the country, finding someone in your house was never good. Grandpa got alert. He couldn't see the man's face, but he could tell something was off. He said, "Hey, who are you?" No answer. "I'm calling the police if you don't leave." Still nothing. Finally, the man got up, turned around, and Grandpa saw his face. It had dark spots, like dried blood. But what scared Grandpa the most was that the man's features were all wrong. He looked human, but not quite. The man walked over to the light switch and turned it off. Everything went dark. Grandpa was terrified. He took a few steps back and found the nearest light switch. He turned it on, but the man was gone. Grandpa started yelling at him to get out, but there was no answer. He remembered he had a gun that he never used but kept for safety. He ran to his room, got it, and walked back to the kitchen. He was scared but ready. He turned on the kitchen light and saw nothing but a moved chair. For Grandpa, who'd seen a lot in his life, this seemed almost natural. He knew ghosts were real, and he'd just seen a dark one. Just as Grandpa was about to breathe a sigh of relief, he heard a soft, almost inaudible whisper behind him. He turned around slowly, and there, standing in the doorway, was the same man he had seen earlier. His eyes were hollow, and his skin was pale, almost translucent. He was holding a small, flickering candle in his hand. The man's voice was barely a breath, but it sent chills down Grandpa's spine. "Leave this place," the man said, his voice echoing in the silence. "They are coming for you too." Grandpa's heart pounded in his chest. He took a step back, but the man didn't move. Instead, he raised the candle higher, and Grandpa saw something he would never forget. The candle's flame was not yellow or orange, but a deep, sinister red. It flickered ominously, casting eerie shadows on the walls. "Who are you?" Grandpa managed to croak out. The man's lips curled into a grim smile. "I am the one who stayed behind," he whispered. "I am the one who could not leave my land. And now, I am the one who must warn you." Before Grandpa could react, the man vanished, leaving behind a trail of cold air and the faint scent of burning wood. Grandpa stood there, frozen, the gun trembling in his hand. He knew then that the danger was not just from the criminals outside, but from something far more sinister that lurked in the shadows. From that night on, Grandpa never slept soundly again. He often heard whispers in the dark and saw fleeting shadows in the corners of his eyes. He knew that the man's warning was real, and that the land he loved so much was now haunted by more than just memories. And Alex, who had listened to his grandpa's story with wide eyes, couldn't shake the feeling that the danger was closer than he thought. This story was shared with us by a friend named Mariana. It all happened on a Saturday morning. Mariana's dad was in poor health due to an illness. It wasn't serious, but because of his age, they had to keep an eye on him whenever he got sick. Since it wasn't contagious, visiting and taking care of him was a good idea. Mariana had no one to leave her son with, so she got in her car and started the several-hour drive to the town where she and her siblings grew up. When she arrived, her dad, Don Jose, was already outside the house. It was common for him to wait there to greet them with a big hug. He looked happy but also tired, with sunken eyes and a sweater to protect him from the breeze. He insisted on carrying her suitcase, but Mariana refused. Instead, she asked him to hold her baby while she put things away. After a few minutes of going back and forth to the car, everything was in order. During the early afternoon, Mariana and Don Jose started talking, catching up on their days. Mariana took care of her dad and also cleaned the house a bit. It was messy and dusty, so she moved from room to room. She asked her dad to take the baby and sleep with him in the bedroom. Don Jose loved the idea. He missed that little baby very much. As he held him, he talked and told stories as if the baby understood everything. As the afternoon passed, the baby started to cry. He was hungry. Mariana took him to another room to feed him. Once he was full, the little one fell asleep easily. She gave him back to Don Jose, and they both took a long nap. During that time, Mariana left the house to buy groceries to help her prepare dinner. She tells us that while she was returning home, the night was already falling. That particular day, the atmosphere felt strange, as if there was danger nearby. When Mariana got home, she went straight to the kitchen. She tied her hair back and started gathering ingredients for dinner. Night had almost fallen, and while she was washing rice, she heard a faint sound. At first, she thought it was her imagination, but then she realized it was Don Jose's voice. Something bad had happened. She felt a shiver and ran down the hall to the bedroom. When she reached the door, she saw the old man with his eyes wide open, trying to sit up in bed. His illness made it hard for him to speak out loud, but Mariana managed to hear him say, "They took him away. They took him away, daughter." Mariana knew immediately that he was talking about her son. She looked to the other side of the bed, and the little boy was gone. She quickly checked under the bed and in the closet, but he was nowhere to be found. Then she noticed the window was wide open, and the icy wind was blowing the curtains. "Oh, daughter, forgive me. I fell asleep, and the cold woke me up. I moved a little, but I didn't see the boy anymore," Don Jose said. Mariana was going crazy. She couldn't believe what was happening. Who could have taken her son in such a quiet town? She ran outside to look for him, but realized it was too dark. She needed a light. She went back and asked her dad where a flashlight was. He pointed to a nearby drawer and she grabbed it. She ran outside again and started searching the field, calling out her son's name, Daniel. Each second passed, and Mariana became more desperate. Tears were at the edge of her eyes. She was thinking about going back to ask for help when she heard a cry. She followed the sound with the flashlight in front of her. After a few meters, she knew where she was heading. At the back of the property, there was a small warehouse that Don Jose used to store old tools. Next to it was a kind of shack with a low ceiling. It looked like an improvised space where they could store extra objects. The door was ajar, as if someone had entered in a hurry. Mariana walked in, holding the flashlight. She swallowed hard before shining the light on the dirt floor of the shack. There was her baby, lying on his back and crying. The relief she felt was so calming that she began to cry. She took a few steps forward to pick up the baby, but suddenly she heard a sound she recognized as a rattlesnake. The rattle continued, and she raised the flashlight to her face level. There, at the back of the shack, she saw something, two bright eyes reflecting the light. It looked like a woman with long, thin hair, wrinkled skin, and a hunched posture, typical of a witch. But something was wrong. Every time the woman tried to move or speak, the rattle noise came out, as if she had a snake stuck in her throat. Mariana looked at her for only a few seconds, but the image stayed engraved in her mind. She said the woman's nails were crooked, and there was definitely something evil about her. Mariana's nerves shot up, but her priority was the baby. She immediately started running back to the house, ignoring any sound she could hear. When she got to the door, she yanked it open, went in, and closed it loudly. Don Jose was sitting in an old chair, shaking with anguish. Seeing his daughter with the baby, he got up and asked what had happened. Mariana told him everything in as much detail as she could. When she finished, the man ran to the door to close it, the windows too, and to close the curtains. It seemed like he was no longer sick. There was an urgency in his actions that worried him more than his own illness. "She's a witch, daughter," he said to Mariana. "Let's go to the room now." And with that, the three of them locked themselves in the room. They all lay down in the same bed, leaving the child in the middle for greater safety. Although they wanted to stay awake, the fatigue of the day and stress were overcoming them. Little by little, they ended up asleep. But the story doesn't end there. When dawn came, something woke Mariana. Her brain had already made her have a light sleep to wake up in case of any danger. What she heard was the sound of a bell outside the window. Don Jose said to Mariana, putting his finger over her mouth. The man had already woken up. Apparently, that sound had been there for a few minutes. Mariana listened and didn't say a single word. Although the seconds passed, the bell continued to ring. Don Jose then said to Mariana in a very low voice, "Daughter, let's pray." She just nodded and followed her father's prayers. "Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name." Mariana repeated each word with all the faith she had. "Please, God, make this stop. Please, make it go away." Little by little, to the surprise of both of them, the bell was getting quieter and quieter until finally, they stopped hearing it. That's when Don Jose dared to whisper, "Blessed be God," with the hoarse voice of someone who spends weeks sick and tired. As time passed, they both felt tired again and ended up falling asleep, calm and sure that nothing and no one would come for their son.